Welcome everyone to the book launch for Shared Universe by Paul Vermeersch. My name is Anjula. I am the events coordinator at Another Story Bookshop, and we're so thrilled to be hosting the event tonight. Before we get on with the event, I would like to offer our land acknowledgement. The sacred land on which we operate has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, and the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Two Row Wampum says we are going to live on this land together and respect each other's sovereignty. The Dish with One Spoon is an agreement that recognizes that we live off the same resources. It is hard to eat a collective meal together off a dish with one spoon, hence protocols are put in place to ensure mutual respect and accountability to each other and to the land. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. Our intersecting communities are comprised of those native to this land, Indigenous peoples from other territory, as well as settlers who have come here by choice, force, or otherwise a result of colonialism and imperialism. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission 94 Calls to Actions reaffirms that the treaties with Indigenous peoples must be lawfully honored. We are all treaty peoples and are responsible for honoring and upholding those agreements. We are grateful for the opportunity to work on this territory and to share space with all of you. So we're so thrilled to be hosting the virtual event tonight for Paul Vermeersch's new book, Shared Universe, New and Selected Poems, 1995 to 2020, published by ECW Press. I'd like to say a big thank you to the great folks at ECW, including Ilham Ali, who helped put this event together. Shared Universe is now officially in stock. I wish I was in the bookstore to show you all the amazing books that we have and the stacks of Paul's books. Our store is not yet open for browsing, but we do have plans to have customers again soon, be able to browse again soon. So you can watch our socials and our website for that date. In the meantime, you can stop by our new takeout window to purchase a book, no advance order necessary. We are doing curbside pickup, local deliveries, and shipments. And we're so excited that Paul will be stopping by outside the store with a mask very safely on Friday, September 18th to personalize copies. So here's your chance. If you would like him to sign a book for you, he will write your name or a friend's name in it. Please order online at anotherstory.ca. Put Shared Universe in the cart, and when you're checking out, make sure to indicate in the notes section who you would like the book signed for. So if it's for yourself, just let us know, and if it's for someone else, make sure you put their name. We are open for curbside pickup 5 days a week, and again, doing local delivery and shipment. So without further ado, let's move on to the event. It's going to be a very fun night because everything Paul does is very fun and interesting. I'd like to introduce the host for tonight's event, Daniel Scott Tysdal. Daniel Scott Tysdal is ReLit award-winning author of 3 books of poetry, the poetry textbook, The Writing Moment, A Practical Guide to Creating Poems, and the TEDx talk, Everything You Need to Write a Poem and How It Can Save a Life. His chapbook, Mad Folding Poems, is forthcoming from Frog Hollow Press. He teaches at the University of Toronto Scarborough. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Anjula. Welcome, friends, to the Shared Universe show. I'm your host, Daniel Scott Tysdal, and I'm very happy to be here with you to celebrate the launch of Paul Vermeersch's Shared Universe, New and Selected Poems. I mean, technically, I'm not really here. In the spirit of his groundbreaking collection, Paul wanted a groundbreaking launch, so he created a virtual AI Daniel Scott Tysdal. Pretty realistic, no? Paul got so much right. The curls, the 5 head, even the awkward, sweaty uncle vibe. The only thing he couldn't nail was the beard, hence the cheesy horseshoe mustache. For those of you who know Paul, you're definitely not surprised he could make a virtual AI me, given his many talents as a writer, visual artist, editor, composer, teacher, holy order leader, and more. To help celebrate this range, the Shared Universe show will feature poems, a conversation, a number of artistic treats, and I hope no AI glitches. On that note, it is my great pleasure to officially welcome to the show, Paul Vermeersch.
Hello, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us tonight, Paul. I wanted to start things off by talking about the collection as a whole. Given that you've taken such a unique approach to the new and selected, what is the organizing principle of Shared Universe?
Organizing this book was an interesting experience for me. When I wrote all the poems in the book, I wrote them in a certain order in time. The first poem I wrote in the book is the earliest, and the most recent is the latest. And often, when people put books like this together, poems are often organized in chronological order. Here's 10 poems from my first book, here's 12 poems from my second book, and so on. But I wondered, what if I wasn't constrained by time? What if I could organize these poems a different way? And what if the books that I've written to date were no longer constrained by time either? Because those books exist the way that they do because other poems that I hadn't written yet couldn't be in those books. So now that all these poems are written, they didn't have to be constrained in time. I tried to imagine, what books would I have written if time wasn't a consideration? If I could have been able to write books unmoored from time. And so all the sections in Shared Universe are not chronological. They are thematic, they are aesthetic, and they take place in a universe where time doesn't matter.
I love that. I love that quality of the book, and I got to have a lot of fun with that, writing the introduction, of traveling to a lot of these different universes, meeting the different Pauls, and getting their assessment of the work. The title is such a timely and provocative one. I wondered, what is a shared universe for you in the context of the book and also in the context of our larger world?
Well, we all share a universe. We're all in it together, so to speak. And the poems in this book all share a universe too. It's very easy to think of individual collections as sort of discrete places or discrete fields of the imagination. But putting this book together, I had to find a way to bring all those fields together, to join them. Much in the way that after you watch a season of Happy Days, and then a season of Laverne and Shirley, and then a season of Mork and Mindy, and suddenly you realize that all these stories take place in the same universe. I had to do the same thing with my poems that Gary Marshall did with his sitcoms.
I love that. I love that. Great, great answer. So obviously I have lots more questions for Paul, but before we get to that, we do have an important word from our sponsors. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back, folks. So those are just a few of the reasons to buy copies of Shared Universe for you and your loved ones. I have been using my copy as a beer cozy, and it works wonderfully, as you can see. So inspired by these imaginative uses for Shared Universe, I want to talk a bit more about the imagination. What role does the imagination play in your poetry?
That's a good question. Imagination is everything. I mean, poems all begin in the real world, in the world that our language comes from. Our flesh and blood is where poems begin, but then they go someplace else. They move towards the realm of the imagination. And poems can do this for a lot of various reasons. Poems are not journalism. Poems are not history. They're not a record of anything specific, or they don't need to be. They're not stenography. So poems can sort of unhook themselves from reality and go someplace else. Poems are neither true nor untrue. It doesn't matter. They're their own thing. So the imagination becomes very important because it fills in the blanks left by reality. And that's where I think the poems happen.
Okay, yeah. Are there any sort of dangers to that? Any dangers to the imagination for you?
Absolutely. The imagination can be very dangerous, or it can feel that way. We don't just imagine pleasant things all the time. The imagination can be very scary. The imagination can conjure monsters. When we're small and we're afraid of the dark, it's not just the lack of light that we're afraid of. It's what we imagine might be in that dark. And so there is some danger to the imagination. And when we imagine that our future may not go the way we hope it might, it can paralyze us from making decisions. So yeah, the imagination can be very dangerous, but it can also be a great gift. Mm. And I try to use imagination in the best way possible. But I use all parts of the imagination. Sometimes I like to write scary things, and sometimes I like to write more pleasant things.
I'd love to hear a poem along these lines if you got one for us.
I'm going to read a poem called Grendel's Mother, which is a poem about monsters. A monster is uncontainable in form. My son cannot contain himself. He has too many, is too much. He can't be filled because he flings himself wide at the slightest brush. He is a spill. His fear is monstrous too. Just try to calculate the scale. The nightmares have. How in his mind the count from flash to thunderclap is always zero. Whose name is that? A monster's glance is one way, there is no in. So build your walls to keep him out, and measure him against the measured walls. Whittle your little sticks and look away. I sing at him. He makes a face. I show him my paintings of stallions that gallop. Dream, my son, I say, of their hoofbeats. Hoot beasts, he cries and spills again, uncontained, the gore of his judgments.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Paul. This poem really highlights, one of the features of Shared Universe, which is your interest and unique work with monsters. I wondered if you could talk a bit about a common misunderstanding about monsters.
It's my belief that monsters aren't always evil or malicious or even necessarily scary, but monsters are things that are misfits. A monster is something that doesn't have a place in the world. And so it's perceived to be scary or out of place. But not all monsters have an agenda to cause harm like Dracula does. But Godzilla, for example, is a monster sheerly because of his size.
Yeah.
That he can't exist in the world. There is no place for him because he is too big. Or Frankenstein's monster is born and innocent, born from the grave, but has no intention of causing harm until he is made a true monster by others.
Yeah.
So I think monsters, and I think Jim Henson in Sesame Street and on the Muppet Show and other programs taught us that monsters are not something to be necessarily feared.
Yeah. Yeah, this idea too of what doesn't fit and finding a place, for where things can fit, I think is a big part of your work too, in a way that really interests me, in the sense of having a book that has visual work, that has musical work, that has these advertisements, that has sheet music. What is it that draws you to these different mediums?
The desire to play and experiment. It's fun to try new things. I wanted to include sheet music in the book because it seems to me that over time the walls between writing and art making and writing music are dissolving, and that these things are sort of blending into one another for me, and I see them all as sort of one project. So I included sheet music in the poem because maybe it's a kind of sound poem, but also the printing of the sheet music itself is also a kind of visual poem, and so I felt like it belonged.
Nice, excellent. Well, on that note, to help us celebrate tonight, LaserGNU has a special treat: the world premiere of their new music video, "The Parisian Assassin." Before we play this, Paul, I was wondering if you could just say a little bit about LaserGNU and the work that went into shooting this video.
LaserGNU is a band primarily consisting of myself and novelist A.G. Pasquella, and we've been collaborating on music for several years now. And to film the video for LaserGNU's video, "The Parisian Assassin," well, we got in there right under the wire. It was right before the lockdown happened. We got all the footage. We had to go to France. We attended a wedding in Paris. You'll see some of the footage in the video. And we got some of the local people and animals to appear in the video. And you'll see me and AG playing accordion and synthesizers and other instruments in the video. So I hope everyone enjoys it. If the lockdown had happened any earlier, we might not have got this footage, but I'm pleased to be able to present this video by LaserGNU today. So here we go.
That was great.
I don't know if everyone knows this, but France is also in the public domain now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, LaserGNU, for that transportive performance. Yeah, some wonderful comments in there on the chat thread. So make sure you check that out, Paul, and everybody else too. That's great. So coming back to shared universe, beyond the imagination, beyond monsters, I found that post-humanism and transhumanism feature in your work. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about what post-humanism or transhumanism is for you.
Well, it starts with humanism, which was a philosophy that simply that human beings can be essentially good and that we should be good to one another. It can be as complicated as you want, but at bottom, humanism is about, people are good and should be good to one another. Post-humanism is a more recent philosophy that says humanism doesn't go far enough. Humanism puts humans at the center of thought and of the universe, and post-humanism suggests that perhaps we are not the center of things, that the universe and other life forms and all other things exist sort of equal to or aside from human beings, and that having a sort of human-centric view of the universe is limiting. So post-humanism looks at other beings, other ways of categorizing the world, the universe, life itself, that does not place humanity necessarily at the center of all that thought. Transhumanism is different. Transhumanism is the idea that humanity and human potential is unlimited, and that we can ultimately take control over human evolution and sort of what a human being can be, and change it to whatever we want it to be through genetic manipulation or through cybernetics and other methods. We can change what we are, and we can become better. That's what transhumanism is. I deal with both of these things in my writing to various degrees. The poem Ape, for example, which is about Coco, the gorilla who speaks in sign language, and Michael, another gorilla that speaks sign language, I would consider a post-humanist poem. Transhumanism is imagining that the human body or the human being can change and evolve into something greater.
Right, okay. Is there a way specifically that poetry allows us to experience or explore the post-human or the transhuman?
I think it all comes back to the imagination. All of these ways of thinking want to achieve a better world somehow, but we can't have a better world unless we imagine it first. We need a blueprint to work towards. And poetry is a delivery system for the imagination. We can imagine better worlds, better beings, better lives, and we can deliver these thoughts and these imaginations, these figments of our imagination through poetry. And poetry can then be the blueprint for that better world if we want it to be. So that's how poetry can deliver on these ways of thinking.
Lovely. Do you have an example of a poem that you could share for us?
Sure. I'll read one of the new poems in the book. This is a poem. This is a transhumanist poem. It's right in the title. This is a poem that imagines the various shapes and sort of modifications to the body that we might achieve to become something different. It's called Required Modifications for the Transhuman. The next Earth will require more of us, give us chromatophores for our skin, for camouflage, for semaphore, and long, sensitive ears to radiate the heat. I want to be tiger-striped in seconds. I want to hear you coming first. Give us tendrils to drink the soil and glorious elongated limbs like tentacles akin to jellyfish to explore the more ephemeral frontiers. We'll have that spooky eye shine to see what the depths conceal in the wrecks of the old life and glimpse the new life in a burst. And give us membranes to seal each orifice from drought. Though I hear it's nicer in Antarctica, it's surely a poor option for the non-swimmers. I'll be all in salamander, and you'll be in bright cuttlefish. The polar EMF beckons us. Come, you reborn, and quench your Atlantean thirst.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paul. So for those of you watching at home, we here at the Shared Universe Show realize these online literary events can be tiring. That's why we have created the Digital Energy Return Interface. In a moment, you will see the interface appear on your screen. When it does, place your hand on the interface's palm scanner for about 10 seconds. The Digital Energy Return Interface will concentrate and relay dissipated bioenergy back into your body, leaving you feeling alert, rejuvenated, and refreshed. Get ready, the Digital Energy Return Interface will appear soon. All right, perfect. I hope you all feel refreshed, and thank you for sharing your bio data with us, which we will put to nefarious use. Haunting is something else that comes up in your collection a lot of different ways, Paul, with the most obvious example being your section and poem titled Suburban Hauntology. I was wondering if you could say, what exactly is hauntology?
Sure. The term was originally coined by French philosopher Jacques Derrida quite some time ago in his 1993 book, Spectres of Marx. And at the time, what he intended was that it refers to the way elements of the past sort of insist on the present, like a ghost. But over the past several years, the term has been used by so many other thinkers and theorists and critics and philosophers that it has come to represent much more than that. And like a lot of new ideas, it's very amorphous. And the way I like to think of hauntology is it's sort of being haunted by futures that will never happen, or by pasts that did, but maybe didn't lead where we needed them to go. So, or being haunted by imaginary periods of time. It's nostalgia for things that never were, or perhaps never will be.
Nice. I guess kind of on that note, how does this past haunt you? You know, maybe in the sense of how does where you were from shape you as a poet?
A lot of my poems, especially my earlier ones, deal with my past in a way that I was haunted by it. I grew up in the suburbs, so a lot of my poems about the past figure the suburbs quite, at the forefront of their setting, which is why there's a section in the book called Suburban Hauntology. It's a way of organizing my thinking about how I grew up and where I grew up and what that place is like. And it's a framework for dealing with memory.
I was wondering if you would mind sharing one of those pieces with us right now.
Sure. This is a poem called Suburban Hauntology, Kitchen Wallpaper. I'm haunted by this wallpaper to this day. The kitchen wallpaper has large yellow flowers and small brown ones, yellow and brown like margarine and pennies. But the colors are washed out because they are old, or because there is too much sunlight, or because my eyes have not yet adjusted to the year. I eat my cereal at the table. I am only little, and the only sorrow I have known arrives and departs like penny-colored sparrows at a margarine-colored bird feeder. My tiny, unmet desires are their favorite seed. The flowers spread into the air like dust motes, hovering in milky shafts of sunlight. Their area is converted to volume. They scatter their pollen like the powdered milk of milkweed, so the whole kitchen is grainy with it. I breathe it in. The avocado green wall-mounted telephone is breathing it too. An invasive species, it rings and rings to call for its mate, but nothing comes. And sometimes the wallpaper skips because the vertical hold is malfunctioning. The floral shapes throb and fluctuate because they have not yet adjusted to the year. The food we eat is made with yellow margarine and white milk and bright orange powder that repels sparrows. You must understand that this is what it was like. It was like this, but this is not how it was.
Love that poem. Maybe this is just a total, I guess, farm kid question. But what was it like? What were the suburbs for you growing up, and maybe what are they now?
For me growing up, they were kind of an in-between space. They were neither city nor country. And that sensation of sort of being caught between things was constant. It was your whole world and there was nothing there. Always caught between. That's what that means to me, and I think that's sort of what's haunting about it.
Wonderful, thank you. So coming up a little later in the program, we have our audience mailbox segment. And as you know, everyone who wrote in with a question was entered into a raffle to win one of an original paintings by Paul Vermeersch. We want to thank the thousands of viewers from coast to coast who wrote in with your questions. But remember, there can only be one winner. Just before the show, our producer drew a name at random from a spinning drum, and we are prepared to announce the winner of the painting now. Beautiful. There's the incredible painting, and our winner is...
the winner is Jeff Dupuis.
Jeff Dupuis. There we are. All right. Awesome. Congratulations, Jeff. We'll be in touch shortly to tell you how you can claim your prize. So before getting to the audience questions, I just wanted to ask about one of my favorite features of Shared Universe, and that is all of the amazing prophetic poems. What draws you to write prophetic poetry?
It's an interesting literary form that I don't think is often explored much. I think a lot of people read Nostradamus or some of the biblical prophets, and they're purely looking for something magical or something occult or something spiritual about it. And I'm more interested in these things as literary forms, and it's a form I wanted to explore in my own writing. I think it can be a lot of fun. I think it provides an interesting voice to write through in the prophetic voice. So those are some of the reasons that attract me to writing prophetic poems.
Wonderful. It seems that, I guess, does the meta occult figure in this? This is something else that really interests you. What is the meta occult? What attracts you to that?
Yeah, the meta occult is my word for these sort of imaginary, made up, invented kind of religious movements that people understand to be made up and completely imaginary, but they also derive great spiritual fulfillment from it. A lot of things that started as a joke sort of grow beyond their original concept. And I'm talking about things like the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which has adherents all around the world. And people do derive legitimate spiritual fulfillment from this, even though they know it's a joke, and they show up for their driver's license photo with a colander on their head, claiming that it's their own religious freedom, and it actually means something to them to get that win.
Yeah.
And there's things like the Church of the Subgenius and Discordianism. There's poems about all these things in the book. But more recently, there's people who fill out Jedi on the census form as their religion. And there's a newer sect called Dudism that venerates the Big Lebowski. So the meta-occult is actually, I think, an emergent and growing phenomenon since the 1970s. And I think it's an interesting one. And it provides a lot of space to play in imaginatively. So and a lot of my prophetic poems take place in that space. And of course, I created my own meta-occult religion in the Holy Order of the Sasquatch several years ago.
That's wonderful. I love that. This is something that, we've talked a lot about with the introduction and preparing for tonight. And one of the things that I love about your meta-occult poems, your prophetic poems, and really your poems in general is that they encourage the reader to prophesize, to act, to create, to fill in the blank. And I wondered, what is the motivation or goal with this reader engagement and activation?
Well, I think sort of interactivity is fun. It's more engaging when the reader feels sort of invited to play along.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, well, on that note, perfect segue. It's now time to turn to our audience questions. So thanks again to the thousands across the country who wrote in. Our producers have chosen 3 questions for our live show. And remember, if we use your question live on the air, you win a free copy of Shared Universe. So here we are with our first audience question. This comes from Sophie Ann Edwards, who asks, how do you move between with painting and text, and how each together informs the other? And what do you think about disciplinary boundaries?
That's a great question. Obviously, I love to paint and make visual art, and I like to write music and do all kinds of things. But poetry and writing has always sort of been my main field. And in fact, when I did my undergraduate education, I studied visual art and English language and literature. It got to a time where I felt like I had to choose one. And for a long time earlier in my career, for about 14 years, I only wrote and I didn't do anything else. And I think maybe at that time it was the right choice for me. But ultimately, I think around 6 years ago, I was at a garage sale with my family, and I found a box of paint, about $400 worth of paint by my estimate. And I asked the lady who was running the garage sale how much she wanted for it, and she said a toonie. And I took that as a sign from the art prophets that I was supposed to start painting again. So I handed her a coin, and I took the box of paint, and I haven't looked back. So like my thoughts about sort of the division of different kind of fields of work is evolving, and the direction in which it's evolving is that the demarcation between these things is evaporating. And that I'm starting to see making art and writing music and writing poetry and other things all as one pursuit.
Cool. Excellent. Lucky us. All right. Our next question is from Pearl Piri, who asks, did your interest in Bigfoot start with reading the library from the start of the Dewey Decibel System?
No, but I wish it did. I did. I loved visiting the library when I was a small child. But the thing that introduced me to Bigfoot and that started my love of Bigfoot was the television show The $6 Million Man. And there was an episode, I think there were a couple of episodes where Andre the Giant appeared as a guest star as Bigfoot, and there were these scenes where Bigfoot and the $6 Million Man had to fight one another, and it scared the crap out of me when I was little. Andre had these like scary, penetrating eyes, and he was covered in hair, and he was so big, and I didn't realize that he was like a man in a suit. I thought they found a scary Bigfoot and put him on TV. So that's where my that's the genesis of my love of Bigfoot comes from that.
That's a great place. And our final question, of course, is from Jeff, our painting winner. Which poem in this collection moves you the most?
And that's a difficult question because, at the risk of sounding egotistical, I have to admit that I'm moved by my own work. But of course, the reason I write many of these poems is because I'm moved by something, and the attempt at writing the poem is to try to capture what it is that moves me about that thing. And I don't know that I can answer Jeff and say that there's one poem in the book that moves me the most, because it would depend on my mood and other things that I'm thinking about. But certainly the poem Ape, which is that I mentioned earlier about Coco and Michael, the gorillas, is one that that moves me. And then there's a poem, The Modern Novel, where I work out, I think, a lot of my childhood psychological issues. And then there's the poem The Unseen World, which is in a roundabout way about Helen Keller and Sullivan, but is also my way of sort of working out my thoughts about what it means to be a teacher and what it means to be a student. And that certainly occupies a lot of my life in a very profound way. And I think that poem may be a contender as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. Thank you, Paul. Great question, Jeff. So thanks again to Sophie Ann, Pearl, and Jeff. You'll receive a free copy of Shared Universe, and someone will be in touch soon with those details. So we're now coming to the end of the Shared Universe show. Before closing, I want to encourage you to order your copy of Shared Universe from your local indie bookstore. Signed copies, as you know, of Shared Universe are available from Another Story Bookshop while supplies last. If you'd like a personalized copy of the book, place your order on anotherstory.ca by September 18th, that's this Friday at noon, and leave your request in the instructions window during checkout. I'm happy to report that you can watch this program anytime you like on the Another Story Bookshop YouTube channel. I want to thank you all again for joining us, and let's give another celebratory round of applause to Paul. Thank you so much, Paul, and congratulations.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. It means an awful lot to me, and if you find your way to the book, I really hope you enjoy it.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine.